If you are looking for a way to make minor blues sound more interesting, one of the ways you can do that is with chord substitutions. And one of the best ways to start learning chord substitutions for minor blues is with Freddie Green chord voicings. The same Freddie Green chord voicings that you can use for playing a dominant sounding blues as well. In this lesson, I'm just going to show you a few steps you can take to start including these kinds of voicings in your minor blues, where to use them, and why they work. So one of the things that makes blues sound kind of static is the idea of just sitting on the chords and not having a lot of different chords to play and using the same chord shapes all the time. If that's what you're doing to play rhythm guitar, then it does start to feel like it isn't really moving or going anywhere, or like the rhythm guitar playing is not that fun or that interesting to do. If you dig back a little further into the swing era, you find this completely different way of thinking about playing chords and about playing rhythm guitar, which can make being an accompanist way more fun to do. So I just want to show you a few ways you can take, say, the first 4 bars of a blues and use this chord style from the swing era to make it more interesting by using different chord shapes than you might ordinarily use, and by using more of them. And in order to do that, you kind of have to understand why they're doing what they're doing. So let's just dig in and see what that's all about. Basically, if you look at the first 4 bars of a G minor blues, you're going to have typically G minor for a bar, C minor for a bar, and then 2 more bars of G minor. Now, the first thing that a swing style guitar player will do is swap out this big bar chord for a chord that looks more like this. And this is a chord shape in the style of Freddie Green, who was the rhythm guitar player with Count Basie, and is sort of the foundation for the swing style of guitar playing. Whether he was the first guy to do it, I'm not really sure, but he was certainly the guy who epitomized the way it's done, because he played with Count Basie for so long. So this chord is not actually a G minor, it's a G minor 6, which means it has the root and the flat third, and then instead of the 5th, it has the 6th. This is kind of a go-to chord when you're in a minor key for the 1 chord. It's not always going to be a G minor 7. It's going to be this G minor 6, because this is considered a more static chord that kind of is a place where you can sit on the sound of G minor. This G minor 7 is kind of waiting to go to C7. It's got some tension built in. This sound is considered to be more like, yeah, it's just rooted on the spot with the sound of the 1 chord. But it's more interesting sounding than just G minor, right? The 6 makes it sound a little cooler. So here's our go-to chord. And the way that this chord is typically played is also different from how you might play in more of a blues context, because it's done with this 4 to the bar comping, 1, 2, 3, where you're doing all downstrokes. And because of the way this chord is shaped, if you let your fingers drape across the strings, you can basically dampen everything except when you want these 3 notes. And you can get them by pressing those notes down to the fingerboard. Everything else will stay damped. And as soon as you relax your grip, you'll cut off the notes. So instead of hearing this, you can hear this. And that lets you get this more dry, percussive kind of sound, and it is rhythm guitar. And typically in a swing ensemble, the rhythm guitar is what sits between the bass and the piano, and it's trying to reinforce the walking bass groove while not getting in the way of any of the kind of more linear or filigreed stuff that the pianist is going to do. So this is kind of the groove. But the thing that makes it interesting is that you don't just sit on this chord. For instance, a lot of times, instead of just sitting on the 1 chord, you can rock between the 1 and the 5 chord. And so here's where it gets a little weird, because the chord shapes look exactly the same for the 1 and the 5, because they are exactly the same shape, but they're doing something different when they're on the 1 chord and when they're on the 5 chord. So here's G minor 6 with the root, 6th, and flat 3rd in G minor. Here's D7, and if you picture, this D7 shape, or this, D9 shape. And then put the 5th in the bass, keep the 3rd in the flat 7. There's your D7 chord. And so you can just rock between 1 and 5. And it sounds pretty cool. And you're not just sitting on the 1 chord. And it works because you're basically starting on 1, going away to 5, and then 5 is resolving or bringing you back to 1. And often on a swing version of the minor blues, there is no quick 4. There is no 4 chord in the second bar. It's just the sound of the 1 chord for 4 bars, or as dressed up, the sound of rocking between 1 and 5. But there's more. We can also take this chord, G6, G minor 6, and we can play an inversion or another re-scrambling of the notes, right? We can take this note, the root, and bring it up to the flat 3rd. We can take the 6th and bring it up. I gotta be careful because sometimes I mess this up. There's the root. And then we can take this, the flat 7, and bring it up to the flat 3rd, and take it up to the 5th. So this chord basically equals this chord, but the notes have been rearranged. We have the flat 3rd on the bottom, and then the root, and then the 5th. And that means, instead of just rocking between 1 and 5 like this, now that's basically a 1 bar idea, right? 1, 2, 3, 4, oh, we're gonna do it again. And again. And one more time. And now even that is gonna wear out its welcome. So now we can go from the 1 to the 5. Next bar, we can go to the 1 in an inversion, and then back to the 5. Now we have a 2 bar idea. So that's pretty cool. And finally, there is this idea that when you are at the end of bar 4 in a blues, to get from G to C, well, G is basically temporarily, it's acting like the 5 chord of C, right? If you're in the key of C, the 5 chord would be G7, right? So if we want to get from G minor to C minor in an elegant kind of way, we can take this G minor and turn it into a G7. So if we were just rocking back and forth like this, at the end of bar 4, we would go to a G7 chord, root, flat 7, and 3rd, which would then take us over to whatever kind of, C minor we're going to do. But since we're playing like this, when we get here, here's the end of bar 4. Let's put the G7 here in this position, and we only have to change one note to get a G major chord. So we've taken the flat 3rd of G, and we already have the root in the 5th, the flat 3rd of G minor. Now we're going to make it a major 3rd of G, right? B flat is going to go to B natural, the 3rd of G. Now we don't have a 7th in here, but the movement to this major 3rd is strong enough that you won't miss it. So now we have end of bar 4, and here's the win. This chord right here, if we were playing this G7 down here and then we jumped up, it's a big jump, it's a lot to move, and it also doesn't sound as musically satisfying because the voicing isn't as tight as far as where the note on top is leading. But if we go from here to here to here to here, right, now we hear this cool little line. It takes us to C minor. Very satisfying. So that gives us these first 4 bars for the blues in G minor. And we could go on from there, but that's kind of enough to digest for one lesson. So check that out, try those voicings out. It's really 3 things. It's understanding, well, it's having the new chord shapes under your fingers, which can take a little time. It's getting that groove with the damp strings and the downstrokes, just the technique for doing that. And then it's the idea of how these chords lead from one to the next and why they work over those first 4 bars. So that's really the chord substitution part of it, the understanding why we can monkey with the harmonies that way and get those kinds of results so that it sounds as cool and interesting as it does. Now in September, I'm going to be offering a new reliable source workshop on playing Freddie Green voicings on a minor blues. So we'll get into this in much more detail, both the voicings and the technique, and also the idea behind the chord substitutions and how to work on and practice all of those ideas so that you develop a smooth and flexible vocabulary for playing multiple choruses on the blues without repeating the exact same things over and over again. If that's something you'd like to learn more about, go to the link below or the link on screen to join my mailing list, and you'll get notifications as soon as that course is being offered in September. In the meantime, if you've got a question or a comment about today's lesson, please leave it down below. I would love to hear from you. As always, thanks so much for watching, and I'll see you next time.